This video is about an alternative to the array called an array list. Now arrays are great when you've got some fixed constant set of data. For example, here we've got a fixed set of strings, or where you know how much data you're going to have and you're only, say, adding any new data to the end. But they're not so useful when you start rearranging things, inserting things in the middle, deleting things from the middle. As we've seen, the code gets quite complex, and array lists make that all very much simpler. Now, unlike arrays, which are built into the language, array lists are a library, and so we have to import them just like we do things like scanners. So import java.util.ArrayList. Now, in this code here, I'm just going to put a blank line there. Then we've got a standard array here, which we're going to use as a source of data for our array list in a minute. And here we're creating our actual array list. Now, the syntax is partly familiar and partly new. So we're saying it's an array list. It's called ArrayListData, which is not a great name, but it'll do for now. And we're creating it in the way we usually do by using the keyword and the name of the kind of thing we're creating here. So it's a new array list. What is new is this stuff in the angle brackets here. This is what's called a type parameter, and we're not going to deal with these much other than with array lists. And basically what this says is that our array list will only contain strings. Just like this here says that an array is only going to contain strings, this is the way we say an array list is only going to contain strings, and you can put other things in here as well, like for example int and so on. Now over here we've got another set of angle brackets too, and these have got nothing between them. You can actually put string in there too as well, and the reason this is present at all and that you're allowed to put string in there is that in some more complex situations you might want to put something different in here to what you put over here. That's why you have to put this angle brackets in the first place, because it's possible that it may not be the same. Similarly, the reason you've got to write array list here and array list over here is that in more advanced circumstances what you write here could be different. Now, because in most cases what you're going to put here is the same as what you're going to put here, Java allows you to leave this one out and just put the angle brackets. So what this basically does is says, create me a new array list which contains strings called ArrayListData. Now, unlike the array version, you don't have to say how big it's going to be to start with, and it will grow and shrink as you put new data in and you take data out. So it's not fixed. Right, okay, so as I said, we've got an ordinary array here, and this is just to provide some constant data that we can use to put in our array list to illustrate how to add data to it. This first loop just prints out the array data, but the second loop actually is going to copy the array data into the array list. So it's going to be for int I equals 0, I less than array data dot length, I plus plus, the usual kind of loop which will loop over the data in the array. We're going to look up each element in the array data I, and to add it to the array list we're going to use this syntax here. We're going to say the name of the array list data, then dot add, and after dot add what we want to add. So we are progressively adding elements from our array, so array data 0, 1, 2, 3 and so on. Notice we're not saying where we're putting it in the array list. Okay, we're not saying we're putting it in a particular location, in the ith location, and if you don't say where you're going to put things, the Java assumes you're putting it on the end. So basically this says keep adding new things to the end. So at the end of this we should have an array list that contains the same data as our array. So down here we're going to print it out. Well, first of all, we're going to print out a message to say this is the array list content. Notice one thing we haven't seen before. I've put this \n here. This is a new line character. This basically adds a blank line at the start of this to add a little bit more space. And then we've got another for loop here, which is very similar to the one we've seen before, except that rather than saying ArrayListData.length, we're saying ArrayListData.size with brackets. This is the way you ask Java, how big is this array list? Now, this is slightly different from the version from an array, because ArrayData.length basically says how long is this array, and what it basically means is how many spaces to store data in the array are there. Well, this one's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But if we'd created an empty array with, say, 10 spaces, it still would have said 10, even though we didn't have any actual data in it. ArrayListData.size is different because it tells us how much actual data is in the array list. Okay? Array lists don't have a concept of empty space. They just have however much data there is in them. If you put more data in, this value will grow. If you take data out, it will shrink. That doesn't happen with ArrayData.length. Now this line here essentially is going to print out the elements of the array list, and this is how we look up something in an array list. If you want to look up the ith element, you write down the name of the array list, then you write .get, and then you write I in brackets after that. That will look up the ith element. So this will essentially loop through the array list and print out the elements we added. So .add puts things in, and .get looks things up. And if I run this, you can see that basically we've got the same in the array as in the array list.